Have you ever felt like life handed you a role you didn't choose? Rules you didn't agree to? Limits that weren't fair? Now imagine realizing that and still deciding to carry yourself with dignity. That's where this story begins. Not with power, not with fame, but with a young boy learning what freedom means before he even knows what the word costs. Nelson Mandela wasn't born a revolutionary. He was born into a small village called Mvezo in South Africa in 1918. No spotlight, no prophecy, just tradition, community, and quiet lessons. As a child, Mandela watched elders lead meetings under trees. No shouting, no ego. Everyone spoke, everyone listened, and without realizing it, he learned something most leaders never do. Leadership isn't about dominating the room. It's about holding space. But here's where it gets interesting. As Mandela grew older, education pulled him beyond village life. He studied law, he moved to the city, and that's when the illusion cracked, because the South Africa he saw wasn't the South Africa he was promised. Black citizens couldn't live where they wanted, work where they wanted, walk freely in their own country. Imagine needing permission to exist. That quiet discomfort turned into something heavier. Awareness. And awareness is dangerous, because once you see injustice clearly, you can't unsee it. Wait till you hear this. Mandela didn't wake up one day angry at the world. He became angry because he cared. He joined the African National Congress, not to become famous, but to fix something broken. At first, the mission was simple: peaceful protest, dialogue, law. The belief was hopeful. If we show them reason, they'll listen. But power rarely gives itself up politely. The government responded with force, bans, beatings, bloodshed. And Mandela faced a question that changes every hero's path. What do you do when doing the right thing isn't enough? This is the moment most people turn back, or numb out, or say, "That's just how it is." Mandela didn't. Instead, he made the hardest choice of his life, not because he wanted violence, but because he believed surrendering to injustice was worse. He helped form Umkhonto we Sizwe, Spear of the Nation, a move that would cost him his freedom, and eventually, his youth. In 1962, Mandela was arrested. By 1964, he stood in a courtroom knowing he might never walk free again. And instead of begging, he spoke calmly. He said he fought against white domination and against black domination, and that his ideal was a democratic society where all could live with dignity. Then he said something chilling: that this was an ideal he was prepared to die for. Let that sit for a second. How many of us won't even risk being misunderstood? But here's where the story really shifts. Mandela wasn't executed. He was sentenced to life in prison, 27 years. Think about that. No phones, no freedom, hard labor, isolation, humiliation. Most people would shrink, or harden, or break. Mandela did something else. He slowed down. Prison became his training ground. He studied. He listened. He learned the language of his oppressors, not to imitate them, but to understand them, because he realized something terrifyingly wise. You can't defeat what you don't understand. And here's the part nobody tells you. Mandela didn't become strong despite prison. He became strong because of it. He learned patience in a world designed to crush it, discipline in a place built for chaos, self-control when hatred would have been easier. Ask yourself honestly, if life locked you in a room with your thoughts, would you come out bitter or better? Because this is the quiet truth of Mandela's journey. Freedom isn't only taken by force. Sometimes it's given up slowly, through resentment, ego, and revenge.
and Mandela refused to give his away. But here's where it gets real. What happened after prison shocked the entire world. And that's where the lesson becomes personal for you.
Picture this. You walk out of a prison cell after 27 years. Your youth is gone. Your parents are gone. The world has moved on without you. Most people would walk out angry, or vengeful, or empty. Mandela walked out clear. And that's what stunned everyone. But let's rewind, because the real transformation didn't happen at the gates of freedom. It happened in the silence of prison. Robben Island wasn't just a jail. It was designed to erase dignity. Prisoners wore shorts in freezing weather. They were forced into hard labor. They were called by numbers, not names. The goal wasn't just punishment. It was humiliation. But Mandela understood something most people never learn. You don't lose dignity when someone tries to take it. You lose it when you give it away. So he didn't. Instead of reacting, he observed. Instead of lashing out, he listened. Instead of letting bitterness rot him from the inside, he refined himself. He exercised daily. He read constantly. He mentored younger prisoners. And slowly, something strange happened. The guards started to respect him, not because he demanded it, but because he embodied it. Here's a wild thought. What if the hardest moments of your life aren't there to destroy you, but to teach you restraint, clarity, and depth? Because that's exactly what prison did for Mandela. It taught him patience in a world obsessed with urgency, perspective in a system built on fear, and emotional discipline when rage would have been justified. But here's where the story flips. As years passed, the apartheid system began to crack. International pressure grew. The government realized something uncomfortable. They couldn't defeat Mandela's ideas, and they couldn't silence his influence. So they did the unthinkable. They started negotiating with him, while he was still imprisoned. Think about the irony. The man they locked away was the only one capable of saving the country. And Mandela understood the responsibility immediately. He didn't negotiate for revenge. He negotiated for reconciliation. Which brings us to the moment that defined his legacy. His release in 1990. Crowds cheered, cameras flashed, the world held its breath. Everyone expected one thing: retribution. Years of pain demand payback, right? But Mandela shocked everyone again. He didn't raise his fist. He opened his hand. He spoke about unity, forgiveness, building a future that included even those who once suppressed him. Now pause for a second. Forgiveness doesn't mean forgetting, and it doesn't mean excusing harm. It means refusing to let pain decide who you become. Mandela knew something most people miss. If you let hatred drive the bus, you end up exactly where it wants to go. So instead, he chose a different route. And in 1994, Nelson Mandela became South Africa's first black president. Not as a conqueror, but as a unifier. He invited former enemies into government. He wore the jersey of a rugby team that once symbolized oppression. He made it clear that freedom wasn't about switching places on the throne. It was about dismantling the throne entirely. Here's the deeper lesson. Mandela didn't see freedom as a finish line. He saw it as a responsibility. Because real freedom isn't, I get mine. It's, we rise together. And this is where the story quietly turns toward you. Because most of us aren't fighting apartheid, but we are fighting something. Old anger, unfair beginnings, cycles we didn't choose. And the question is the same. Will you let what happened to you define you? Or will you decide who you become next?
Mandela's life teaches us this. You don't need power to lead. You don't need revenge to heal. And you don't need perfect circumstances to choose dignity. But here's the final twist. Mandela said something near the end of his book that most people skim past. He said freedom isn't just breaking your own chains. It's living in a way that doesn't create chains for others. That means how you treat people, how you handle conflict, how you carry pain forward. And that's the part no one can do for you. So ask yourself this. What would change in your life if you stopped reacting and started responding? Because that's where real strength begins. And the final lesson of Mandela's journey ties it all together.
Before we reach the end of Mandela's journey, there's a part of the story most people rush through, and honestly, it might be the most important part. Because after Mandela became president, the hardest work hadn't even started yet. Winning freedom is dramatic. Building peace is exhausting. South Africa was standing on a fault line, decades of anger, generations of trauma. People who had lost homes, families, futures. This was the moment where history usually repeats itself. New leaders, same cycle, different names on top. But Mandela refused to play that script. Instead of revenge, he chose something radical. Truth. He helped create the Truth and Reconciliation Commission, not to punish, not to shame, but to expose pain without letting it turn into poison. Victims spoke. Perpetrators confessed. The country listened. Was it perfect? No. Was it painful? Absolutely. But it did something rare. It allowed a nation to grieve without tearing itself apart. Here's the uncomfortable truth. Most people don't avoid healing because they're weak. They avoid it because it forces honesty. And honesty changes everything. Mandela understood this deeply. You can't build a future on silence, and you can't outrun wounds you refuse to name. Now let's zoom out for a second, because Mandela's story isn't just about politics. It's about emotional leadership. He didn't lead through fear. He led through example. When people around him clung to anger, he modeled restraint. When others demanded payback, he chose patience. And that made people pause. That made people listen. Here's a quick reality check. Leadership isn't about being loud. It's about being grounded when chaos wants control. Mandela once said that courage isn't the absence of fear. It's the triumph over it. And that idea applies far beyond presidents and prisons. It applies to your daily life. The argument you want to win. The resentment you keep replaying. The moment you feel justified in shutting down. Every one of those is a fork in the road. React or respond. Mandela trained himself to pause, to ask, what moves us forward, not what feels good right now. And that's a discipline most people never practice. Because emotional control isn't flashy, but it's powerful. Let's be honest. We live in a world addicted to outrage, quick reactions, hot takes. Mandela played a longer game. He knew that dignity outlives drama. And here's something rarely talked about. After becoming president, Mandela only served one term. One. He stepped down willingly. No power grab, no ego spiral. He believed leadership wasn't about staying. It was about preparing others to continue. That decision shocked the world, and it revealed something profound. True power doesn't cling. It creates space. Now bring this back to yourself. How many problems in your life exist because someone needed to win instead of understand? How many conflicts drag on because no one wants to be the first to soften?
Mandela chose softness with strength, and that combination changed history. But there's one final idea we need to explore before we close this story. Because Mandela never pretended he was perfect. He admitted mistakes, regrets, moments where the cost was too high. His family life suffered, relationships fractured, time was lost forever. This is important because it reminds us that even the most meaningful lives come with trade-offs. There is no path without sacrifice. The question is the sacrifice aligned with your values? Mandela didn't chase comfort. He chased meaning. And meaning gave him endurance. So here's the challenge hidden inside this story. What are you enduring right now? And is it leading you somewhere worth going? Because resilience without direction is just suffering. But resilience with purpose? That's transformation. And in the final part, we'll bring everything together. Mandela's definition of freedom, why it still matters today, and how you can apply it to your own life, starting now.
Here's the part most people miss. Nelson Mandela didn't believe freedom ended when the chains came off. He believed that was only the beginning. After 27 years in prison, after becoming president, after standing on the world stage, he said something unexpected. Freedom is not a destination, it's a responsibility. Let that sink in, because most of us think freedom means doing whatever we want. Mandela saw it differently. He believed real freedom means living in a way that protects the dignity of others. That idea changes everything. It means your choices matter even when no one is watching. It means your success is incomplete if it comes at the cost of someone else's humanity. It means power without empathy is just another form of oppression. And this is where his story quietly becomes yours. You may never face prison, you may never lead a nation, but you face something just as real. Fear, anger, comfort that tempts you to stay small. Mandela's long walk wasn't just physical or political, it was internal. He had to free himself from hatred before he could help free a country. That's not easy, because holding on to anger feels powerful. Letting it go feels risky. But Mandela understood something most people learn too late. Hatred doesn't punish the oppressor, it imprisons the soul. And he refused to stay trapped. So ask yourself this, what are you still carrying that's weighing you down? Old resentment, unspoken bitterness, a version of the past you replay on loop. You don't need to forget, but you might need to loosen your grip. Because freedom isn't about erasing pain. It's about deciding what no longer gets to control you. Mandela once wrote that being free isn't just casting off chains. It's living in a way that respects and promotes the freedom of others. That applies to how you speak, how you argue, how you disagree. Especially when it's uncomfortable, especially when it would be easier to shut down or lash out. And here's the uncomfortable truth. You don't become a better person through big moments. You become one through small, consistent choices. Choosing patience over reaction, listening instead of interrupting, standing firm without dehumanizing the other side. That's leadership, not the title, the behavior. Mandela didn't wait for permission to lead. He led in prison. He led in negotiation rooms. He led by example. And that's the quiet invitation in this story. You don't need a platform to live with integrity. You don't need power to practice courage. You need awareness and intention. Because freedom isn't just political, it's emotional. It's the ability to respond instead of react, to choose values over impulses, to act from purpose instead of fear. And yes, that's harder than scrolling, harder than blaming, harder than staying comfortable. But it's also how meaningful lives are built. Mandela's journey reminds us of something simple but profound.
The world doesn't change through loud anger alone. It changes through disciplined hope, through people who refuse to let suffering make them small, through individuals who turn pain into principle. So here's the final takeaway. Your long walk may not look like Mandela's, but it still matters. Every step you take toward integrity matters. Every moment you choose dignity over ego matters. Every time you act with compassion when it would be easier not to matters. Freedom is never finished. It's practiced, daily, quietly, courageously. And if this story stirred something in you, don't ignore it. Sit with it. Carry it forward. And if you want more stories that challenge how you think, lead, and live, subscribe. This walk is better when you don't take it alone.